Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Author of Your Own Story show. And I'm super excited to have Don Giafardino. Don, I knew I'd mess this up when we talked on this show. Don is not only an entrepreneur, and although he may not like it, he is an inventor. He is extremely brilliant and has done so many different things in his life. So I'm super excited to unpack those. One of his products is a company called AYS, and he invents adjustable maces, club bells, and a whole slew of other products that, frankly, I use personally in my own workouts and have been recently introduced to them through the place that I train at right now. So, Don, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Doug.
Yep. And I told you right before we hit record that I knew I was going to mess that up, and I was asking you.
That's been I've been John Giafardino my whole life, teachers, everybody in school. So it's okay. I'm used to it.
Oh, so humble. Well, Don, I know we've talked in the pre-call, and you gave me some of your background, and very colorful. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on this show is because your story is inspirational for a lot of reasons. One of which is your background is frankly unconventional when you think about, the vision we're sold to in the media and the movies about an entrepreneur and businessman who goes out and invents a successful product. You produce products and things of that nature, but then also how humble you are about how successful you have been and in this journey and how you've gotten there. So do me a favor, and for the people that are listening or watching us right now, give me a short fill in the blanks of, before AYS, where did you come from and how did you get to where we are today?
Okay, so the two job descriptions that took up most of my life have been construction and restaurants. And restaurants I started working in when I was 11 years old, washing dishes at a restaurant in New York. And I lived in Connecticut, but I actually used to walk into New York to go and wash restaurants at that age. I'd work in the summer times until 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And, I started like a hard work ethic from then. It was always, these guys kind of like groomed me along the way to like grow up in that little restaurant, that pizzeria that I worked at. And eventually I ended up owning two restaurants, not at the same time, but at different times in my life. And when I had gotten kind of finished with that, I was dabbling in and out of construction while I was working in the restaurants in between jobs and things like that. Plus, actually, I've had 47 jobs since I was 12.
47, yeah.
47 jobs, and I've only been fired from once and laid off from two. So, that's a pretty good track record. Some jobs, I got to say, I only worked a week at, didn't like the job, or, the job, just wasn't for me, let's just say. Did try a lot of things. I tried to be very diverse in my life. I got into construction. Like I said, I was in and out of it, while I was working in the restaurants. But I really made that change in my later 30s. I said, I got to get out of the restaurant business. This is for young guys. Let me go into construction. And I figured if I learned how to operate heavy equipment, that I would always be in demand. And I ended up going back and digging holes, to start in construction, to be able to learn how to use the equipment at a company that I worked for. Started learning equipment there, got laid off from that job, went to another job, and finally ended up in becoming a crane operator. And that was really interesting, and that was a very exciting and good career, I think, good move. And during my time there, I had gotten laid off from the crane. We're getting a nice thunderstorm in right now. I hope you don't hear too much of it on there.
No.
But on the crane company that I worked for, I was laid off in 2008. I was there for 5 years before that. Got laid off in 2008 when the market took a tank. And I ended up going back in the restaurant for a little bit, in the restaurant business. A friend of mine opened one. He needed help with it. He says, just a little while. I worked for him. From there, when I left that place, I had got a job as a cell phone tower climber and a crane operator for a cell phone tower company. So I got hired basically at 48 years old to climb cell phone towers. And if I wasn't in good shape, I wouldn't have been able to do that or get that job or, get that position as their crane operator also. From there, I had a moment in my life where an accident happened at work. Nobody got hurt, thank goodness. A piece of equipment got damaged. It was my responsibility, but not my fault. So in that aspect, the cell phone tower company let me go. The crane company that originally let go of me hired me back to be on a job that was supposed to just be for 8 months. And I was supposed to be basically helping another crane operator with difficult lifts. And I was supposed to be there all day. It was just a really weird setup. And they said, just go down there and hang out with this guy all day. 2.5 years later, I was still on the same job. But in that time, it afforded me to be able to start developing the ADX Club. Because if I go back to the cell phone tower company, when I had that little accident with them, I was feeling bad for myself a few days later. So I went out and had a few beers. And after I had those few beers, the police gave me a ride, not home, but they gave me a ride to downtown. And I had to reevaluate what I was doing with my life, in other words. So I had this little moment of when I was in the back of the cop car in handcuffs. And I'm going to say it wasn't the first time in my life. And hopefully it was the last time. I don't plan on doing anything stupid in the near future. I was thinking to myself, and the cop actually asked me, he says, "Why are you looking so mad?" And I said, "I'm really not mad." I said, "I'm just thinking that, I'm not really in charge of my life here. I said, I got in trouble with you and it was from outside circumstances, but it was definitely my overall responsibility, but it made me reevaluate, wow, I'm in the back of a cop car and it happened just like that. And now I'm going to look at losing my CDL license. I'm probably going to get fired from the cell phone tower company because I need to drive vehicles for them. And it's going to be a few years of in and out of court, which it turned out to be. And I was found not guilty, but after I had lost that good job. But what I was saying was, I needed to do something again to take charge of my life. So I started working on, I had the idea for the adjustable club, but there was never anything to push me. And that arrest was like, you know what, get this thing done, get it out there. Let's see what we can do with it and, see what it turns into. And here I am today talking to you 5 years later.
Well, I'm glad that it all came to this point because we've had some great conversations. And as I said, as somebody who's been in the fitness industry, I started in 1995. So I've been here for a while. But I got introduced to mace work and using your mace at the facility that I go to. So I'm glad. But for those listening to this,
that's awesome.
It is awesome. Yeah. So, which was funny when we first got connected, I didn't know that I didn't connect the dots at all. Neither of us did. So it's very serendipitous at that point. For those listening to this, Don, and that you have like, what the heck is a mace? What is a club bell? What are these two crazy guys talking about? Give us a rundown on how would you describe a mace or a club bell, and then why should anybody care?
That's a good question. The easiest way, people that are a little older will remember Indian clubs, the wooden clubs that used to be hanging. There used to be, I'm sure there's still a few gyms that still have the old sets of them. But when I was a little kid, they'd be hanging up in gyms, and I'm talking in the 60s. And they'd be hanging on the walls in a gym, displayed out there in a little rack, and they'd be like the shorter ones to the longer ones. And they're weighted clubs. For people that still don't know what they are, they're similar to what a juggler would use, the pins that look like small bowling pins a juggler would use. And that's the easiest way to describe it to people. The mace is just a longer handled version of that. And both of these exercise tools were very popular a little more than 100 years ago during the Victorian time. And before the adjustable barbell was invented, people would exercise with them, exercise with sandbags, all of the things that we say now and we classify as like functional fitness tools or unconventional fitness tools. They're showing back up again. And these were all implements that were used 100, 120, 130 years ago that quite regularly in the gymnasiums that were around the world. The British military, the Australian military, and the United States, and I believe Canada used Indian clubs to train their soldiers when soldiers still carried swords. And that was up and including World War I. They were using them. After World War I, it all kind of like, slowed down as far as the club training, and harder PT training was developed, more regimented calisthenics and pull-ups and push-ups and climbing over walls and obstacles, something like, akin to a Spartan race. It was how their PT went. And it kind of fell into obscurity because of in the private sector due to the advent of the adjustable barbell. Mm-hmm. So if people get that kind of picture, with the old time people swinging the little wooden clubs around, or a juggler using them, they got an idea of the shape of the implement. And now in modern times, the ones that, these clubs range from a half pound all the way up to, I've seen 80-pound wooden ones and 60-pound steel ones. I haven't come across too much heavier than that. They're kind of hard to swing. And then the mace, again, is the same version, but it's got a longer handle to it.
Okay, fantastic.
So
that's a great description and some things I didn't know. In fact, I used to work for a certification company writing textbooks, and I remember the photos when you walk into the corporate headquarters, and they had kind of the old black and the white strongmen, right, using club bells, kettlebells at the time, which weren't trendy, I would say, but were still kind of being used by strongmen who kind of just in the trenches, I would say, and just knew what they were doing based on application. How did you get into this type of training?
That's a good question. I started out, as a very young guy, 12 years old, and I had my 25-pound weight set that my parents got me for Christmas. The plastic-coated, concrete-filled ones. Oh, yeah. I think they were a Marcy brand. I mean, I can't remember. And I quickly outgrew that, but I used it as much as I could. I've been into fitness since I got that weight set at 12 years old, and I like to refer to myself as being part of the muscle and fitness generation, because right in the mid 70s was when muscle and fitness like hit the newsstands, like at the grocery store. Instead of going to like the stationery store or a magazine store to buy training magazines, they were in the grocery store. Now muscle and fitness was right there, and it was like it kind of like egged us on and promoted fitness with us. So I couldn't wait to get the next issue of Muscle and Fitness when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. And, eventually I built up my collection of weights, and I liked more of the strength aspect than the bodybuilding aspect. I was reading more articles from Fred Hatfield, that's Dr. Squat, and Sal Aria. And
that's where I saw my pictures.
At ISSA?
Yep.
There you go. And so anyway, I used to be very interested in that. Very interested in the like the NFL Combine. I was always paying attention to that when I was a kid. Like how many times can you bench 225 pounds? So this was the kind of training we did. We got dabbled with the bodybuilding, but it was more for getting bigger and stronger for sport, and also to be, a big, strong guy when you're a teenager, because, you're young and you want to feel your oats and you want to be a tough guy and everything. And, we grow out of that as time goes on. But I got into that heavy form of training, and in my it must have been from the time I just about turned 30, I joined a powerlifting gym here in Florida. I'd grown up in New York and Connecticut and then moved to Florida in my very young 20s when I was 22. And I was down here a while, and I found a powerlifting gym, and the guys, wrote a program for you, and they kind of were like there coaching you rather than just setting you out on your own. And the other powerlifters that trained in there were, kept an eye on each other. So they, everybody offered help and tips and tricks and things like that. And so my brother and I, we trained there, and we got into it more and more. It was somewhere around, it was 1996. I was training for a bench press competition that was going to be held on Fort Lauderdale Beach. And I was trying to get a 400-pound bench. And at the time, my bench was, I think, 365 or, somewhere around there. And I was training at home at this point. I had stopped going to the powerlifting gym. It was at a time when I owned one of my restaurants. I used to work anywhere between 12 and 16 hours a day. I'd come home and just train in my garage. I had a power cage set up and a lot of weight in the gym that I had in my garage. And I did nothing for mobility or recuperation, didn't understand the importance of it at that time, but I understood it after this happened. I was using some weight, and I was following Dorian Yates' Blood and Guts program. I don't know if you remember that. It was basically you lifted 90 to 95% of your maximum weight, and you would do it for single reps. And it was the fastest, most efficient workout I ever did. So I would bench about 8 sets of singles. Basically I'm doing 8 reps with a minimal warm up and just doing that exercise. And I wouldn't train it again for another 7 to 9 days. I just, like if I did it on Monday, I wouldn't bench again till the following Tuesday or Wednesday. And it would be all recuperation, but just totally demolish your muscles. So once you got more than 8 reps, you would add on, 2.5 pounds or just a little bit of weight. I had a pound and a quarter incremental plates to be able to go up 2.5 pounds. So I was training this way for a while, and I ended up missing one of the attempts to do one of those reps. And the bar went cockeyed on me. It kind of came down on my right shoulder, and I felt like I had just lost strength in all of my right arm. And it felt kind of funny in my chest and in my shoulder, but it was nothing that was painful. I dumped the weight off of me, even in the power cage. It still made a big mess and everything at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I picked everything up and I said, that's my training for tonight. I'm just going to go to bed. The next day I woke up and my pec was swollen up to my chin. I thought I had my pillow was laying underneath me. Now, I got to tell you this too. At the time that I did this, I was 248 pounds. And I was, I'd say I probably had like a 36-inch waist, 37-inch waist. I wasn't like tubby, but I was getting there if I didn't change the way I was, if I didn't do different types of training. Well, anyway, the next day I woke up and I had this big swollen pec and my shoulder hurt. And I was like, I just moved funny or something like that. But then the pec started turning black and blue throughout the day. The swelling went down, but this black and blue started going. And then the yellow and green came out, because when this is for younger people, people that are younger than 30, when your bruises stop turning black and blue and start changing to yellow and green, stop doing whatever it is that's giving you those bruises because you're healing slower. Just want to let you guys know that. Well, anyway, long story short, comes to find out that I ended up doing some damage to 2 of my rotator cuffs and I tore my pec up here. And I didn't even know I did this. And this was like months later. I finally went to the doctor to find out what this pain in my shoulder was about because it didn't go away. It was chronic. And I'm making pizza at the time. I own a pizzeria, so I'm doing this all day long. So that's not helping the situation out either. I couldn't get into the like a bottom plank position if I was on my hands, like to do a push-up. Yep. Like the bottom position of a push-up. I could start at the top, but as soon as I lowered myself, when I got into that position, I would just crumble because of the pain in my shoulder. The pain never went away. I went to see doctors. See doctors immediately. Don't wait like I did, please, everybody. I went and got an MRI done on it, and they told me that you tore your pec muscle. Your shoulder's like a little screwy. You had a grade 1 separation or a grade 3 separation or level 3 separation where the ligament got stretched, but it didn't tear all the way through on the acromioclavicular joint. So if you guys don't know what that is, that's the point where your shoulder blade and your collarbone touch each other to create the socket for your humerus, your bicep bone, to go into to create a shoulder joint. And that separated, and what I was getting was my bicep tendon, one of my bicep tendons was getting in there, and a nerve was getting pinched in there during the day when I was moving around and working. So it would go in and out, and it would pinch on this nerve and pinch on this tendon, and it would be very, very painful. I lived on painkillers for a long time. Like I said, I couldn't get into a push-up position, so bench pressing was out, push-ups were out. I could do pull-ups on good days when my shoulder felt stable, and I would try to train around this. I also found that when I went jogging or running, or even running up a flight of stairs, the bouncing up and down on my shoulder would create pain also. So I lived with this pain, and I started getting limited mobility because I wasn't moving like I normally would move. And I'm doing pizza. Now you think I'm always working in front of me. I'm not putting my arms behind me like if I was doing flies or anything. Couldn't get out of the bottom of a fly to save my life, even with 10-pound dumbbells. That's how bad my shoulder got. I lived with this for about, I think, 11 years. And then in 2007, I decided that I was going to type in, I said, I really got to get back into fitness more than what I was doing, like fitness like I was on a crutch. Yeah. Imagine like if you had a crutch and you had that crutch with you all day long and you couldn't put it down and you had to use that crutch to do everything. And so like if I was curling, let's just say, I had to curl around the crutch because my shoulder was hurting. So I had this impediment that was keeping me from moving properly, even to work out. So 2 doctors suggested that I needed a screw put in there to tighten up this joint. One doctor said you could possibly do it through therapy. I think it'll take too long. You should just go for the operation. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. So like I said, I lived with it for like 11 years. I looked up in 2007, pre-YouTube, pre-Facebook. I typed in on Google, I think that was the search engine then, alternative shoulder exercises. And I came up with a very popular guy who was swinging his brand of clubs at the time. And he was doing a mill where you're going like this, it's like almost like a constant throwing motion. And I looked at that and I said, that is the exercise that I really need to do. I need to, that even, just everything about it, the way he was doing it, the look of tranquility on his face, like he was into his workout. I was like, that's what I need to do to fix my shoulder. So at the time, I was also paying an enormous amount of child support. And I didn't care because it was for my kids, but it left me with very little playtime money or spending money for myself. I said, let me figure out what I can use to emulate one of those clubs. So I took a baseball bat and I realized right away that it was way too light. It was just, I had no torque to it, no swing. I took the old school dumbbells that you screwed the screws in, they were adjustable.
Yeah, adjustable dumbbells, absolutely.
Yeah. I took one of them and I put a 3-pound weight on it. So I had this little stubby handle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've actually still got it set somewhere with a bunch of my prototype clubs. And I started swinging this, and I said, I'm going to swing this for 100 repetitions. So I learned how to do the mill move as best as I could. It was wonky at the time. I got to say that, but I did it as best as I could, and I did, excuse me, 100 repetitions on each arm every night for 7 nights a week for 3 months.
Wow.
And I said, I'm going to see if this, and as I was doing this, I noticed that the pain in my shoulder, the time that it hurt during the day would diminish. So I was like, instead of it hurting for, let's say, 15 hours a day, now it was only hurting for 5 hours a day. And then it was going even less and less. And I said, there's something to this. So at the end of the 3 months to the day, I finished my 100 swings on both arms, and I dropped down to the floor and I knocked out 10 push-ups. And I said, this is really incredible. I did this without any shoulder pain. So I realized that there was some merit and some worth to this style of training. And I had to look into it more, because I figured if it helped me, it might be able to help other people. So, I was like, wow, how come this isn't everywhere? Why are all physical therapists in every single gym using this to keep people healthy? And then as I discovered the history and found out how they fell out of fashion, but now they've come back into fashion in recent times, due to the increase in functional fitness, the rise of CrossFit, the other unconventional type of gyms, people that just don't want to lift weights to stay in shape, because either they're intimidated or they just don't like it, or it's not their thing, or they're tired of it. This is another way to get resistance training in. And it's a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed the journey of learning. I learn something new every day with this type of training, something that I've never encountered before or never was really receptive of before. Like somebody would give me tips and tricks, how to, hacks, how to bench press better or something like that. But I was never really into it like I'm into the club training, because there's so much to learn. And even when you get good at it, there's so much more that you could still do. Like, you can always be improving. Do you remember the game Othello?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They had it. I remember the TV commercial for it. It would say, it takes a minute to learn and a lifetime to master. That's pretty much what club training is. So even when you get good at it and you've got your form like dead on accurate and perfect, there's always still room for these little improvements and little things that you could do. And now I'm discovering like the different ways of swinging the club, much like the kettlebell, like hard style, sport, things like that. It's kind of taken on its own unique characteristics by the way people train. Some people train very fluid and with lighter weight clubs, and that's really cool. And other people are using very heavy clubs where they're really like getting their whole body involved in the motion. And it's kind of interesting to see how it's changing and progressing.
Absolutely. And for those that are listening to this and can't see it, so what Don is talking about, the mill, the way I would describe it is like throwing a baseball, but like your range of motion is a little bit more limited. If you're just going around if you're in a small room trying to throw a baseball, because there's not quite as much extension from behind you, right? Would you agree with that?
Exactly. Oh yes, exactly. Especially with the heavier clubs, you want to keep them closer to your body. With the lighter weight Indian clubs, you can open up more with the clubs and extend your elbows outward. But for safety purposes, it's much like making sure your shoulders are squared and packed and everything, before you begin to like do overhead pressing.
Yep.
And you're getting your spine in the right place. Some people can naturally stand that way. Other people actually have to work their body into the position to get it that way because they're working on their posture. So, with that being said, like you said, it's like if you were throwing a ball in a very, very limited range of motion, like where you're not extending your elbow out as much, and you could constantly like you had a table that would just produce a ball in front of you. Right when you dropped your hand, you could pick another one up and just keep going in this motion. And that's basically like doing, more than 1 mil. It's like a constant throwing a ball, like you said. And it's a very, very cool exercise to learn how to do. That's kind of like the hallmark of the, much like weightlifters, anybody that's bodybuilding or powerlifting, how much you bench, bro. And with the people that train with clubs, they say, how much do you mill, bro?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. That's kind of like the measure exercise of, how much can you mill? So it's cool that it's taking on this, different, it's growing with the way people want it to grow. So, or people expect it to grow. And I find it a very rewarding modality of exercise.
I agree. And so what I found so interesting is, being in the industry for over 20 years, the guy that I'm working with, who we both know, is the first person I actually hired to work with and just said, hey, I'll work with you. And that was one of the first things he recommended. I've had 2 shoulder surgeries, one on each shoulder. And my shoulders were tight, and I wasn't going to do any overhead movements. I was saying, hey, look, I'm done. Like with that kind of stuff, let's move in a different direction. And then he introduced me, and I had club bells, but he introduced me to yours, and we kept going through the motions. And for anybody listening to this, because the number of people that have shoulder problems in any level is astronomical. So it felt like for me, well, the first time it didn't feel natural. It looks really cool. It looks like some kind of flow state that somebody like yourself can get into. But it was tough the first time. But after a few sessions of doing it, it felt as if somebody was putting lubricant in my joints. I started to feel a lot looser. I started to feel like that kind of, as I get older and have been banged up so much time through competitive sports and lifting, that it felt like somebody was finally opening up, right? Opening up that capsule in my shoulder, and I could start feeling that range of motion. And then also getting into the kind of, a little bit more of that flow state. It becomes a little bit Zen-ish in my experience anyway.
You're right. The Zen experience, I experience like when I'm doing mid-range, I usually train between, I don't do high reps with light weights. I'll do like mid-range weight as a warm-up, and I use mid-range weights. Now these weights that I'm talking about are a lot different than like weightlifting weights. So I'm using mid-range weights like 15 pounds, 12 and a half pounds, 17 and a half pounds to do, like where you could break down the exercises, like the mill, let's say it travels in a 360-degree rotation. You can break down different points of that where you have, a start and a stop for every section. I can't remember if there's 5 exercises in the mill. There's 5 exercises in the mill itself. So you could take each little section of exercise and make that, into a workout to develop your patterns for the mill. That's how I learned how to do it. I sliced it up, and then I used a light weight to get the pattern and develop the skills for that pattern, and then strung them all together in a continuous motion to do, added the 5 of them up to get the mill itself. And, that's always, a way to, add to your added dimension to your training. So you could pick apart your exercises, the ones that you can do complete, and regress in them, in other words, or if you're starting as a beginner, progress from them to a complex exercise, and then revert back to develop the strength patterns to develop heavier and heavier weights without actually doing a sloppy version of a mill. Say I wanted to go up 10 pounds in my mill, I wouldn't, just slap 10 pounds on there and try to do it. I'd reduce the amount of weight that I was using and start doing my patterns, each little section, and then add the weights onto there, use a heavier club for each one of those exercises until I was able to swing the heavier club for the complete mill. and that's always a cool way to train. But the Zen flow and stuff like that, I've never really gotten like that Zen experience, like I said, because I'm always trying to like move the weight and trying to keep good form during it. So I'm very in tune to like doing the heavier stuff. I can see that happening like when I do competition training for the mace competitions where I run out. I'll be doing I train for 7 minutes for a 5-minute competition. Mace competition, by the way, is the 10 to 2 exercise. And it is for, right now, the Vintage Strength Games does them for 5 minutes. So it's how many reps you get in 5 minutes doing that. So I train for 7 minutes so that I have the extra, and the last minute, actually the last 15 seconds that I train of those 7 minutes, I do an all-out sprint with it to actually get my numbers up so I can always have that sprint power on tap for a burst of like 15 or 20 seconds when I'm doing a 5-minute competition set. So there's different strategies and stuff with that. That's the only time I could say I get like in that Zen type of mode, because I'll just stare at the clock and count my reps while I'm doing it to keep my brain active as I'm doing something physical to make that complete mind-body connection.
Gotcha. Yeah. And then again, and Don, because our audience is so diverse, you know, if you're thinking, what the heck is Don talking about, the 10 and 2 and the mace, you know, think of these old movies you've seen with the, you know, the gladiators or the Vikings with that huge hammer that, you know, they're smashing people with.
Yeah.
That's kind of an analogy. And then it's a pendulum that Don's doing, bringing it from, and correct me if I'm wrong, a pendulum that swings behind you and he's bringing it to his front. So that stick at one point has a 2 at the 2 o'clock, and then he swings it back as a pendulum behind him and then brings it back to 10 o'clock and repeats that. Was that a fair assessment of that exercise?
That's perfect. You just pretend that your body, your feet is 6 o'clock, your head is 12 o'clock, yep. And the 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock position off of your shoulders is where you want to bring the head of the weight part of the mace. So I'll be swinging it just like Doug described. I swing it behind my body and pull it to the front, and it'll be angled off for viewing purpose. This would be 10 o'clock and this would be 2 o'clock. So, people could get an idea of that. So like if you pretend your head is at 12 o'clock high, 10 and 2, the angle off of that. And if you raised your arms up straight out to the sides, that would be 3 and 9. So it's somewhere in between your arms being raised up parallel with the ground and the corner of your head, basically.
Yep. And
it's about a 30 degree or 45 degree angle somewhere in there.
Yeah, one of the reasons I think go ahead, Don.
I was going to say, and in the competition, you have to pass both the left side and the right side, and that equals 1 rep. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 1 and 1 makes 1, 1 and 1 makes 2, and you have a judge watching you to make sure that your hands reach down towards your belly button, and and they also disappear behind your head when you're swinging it, when the mace is behind you.
One of the reasons, for anybody listening to this, I think this is catching on so quickly. There's multiple reasons. One is with bodybuilding, it's all about aesthetics. But with a lot of times, the biggest complaint with bodybuilders is you get gummy, you get stuck, you get injuries, and it's not as functional. Whereas we look at functional fitness, especially in today's society, we're by computers all the time. And we get that kyphotic posture where our shoulders are coming into our chest. And we just get tight. Like reaching behind your back can be really tight. They call it, the scratch test or whatever you want to say. These types of movement patterns that, Don, that you're describing, this frees that up. It's kind of reversing almost all of that constant pressure that we put on ourselves, whether we're on our phone, our computer, we're hunched over driving. This pulls your chest, your shoulders back, opens your chest up, which of course helps your aerobic capacity and a million other things. But I think people feel that, and it has a natural, take to it. And besides that, it looks really cool.
It is very primitive looking. I mean, you're using a war tool. Both of these tools were used in battle before and during, the advent of swords when when humans discovered metals. Prior to that, it's probably the second oldest tool known to man. The first one's a rock. The second one would be a branch, and a branch is basically a club. You know, they realized they could, clock somebody in the head with it, or, smack the saber-toothed tiger with it, or something like that. Go out and get a date with it, bonk her on the head and drag her in like those old cartoons, things like that, being Neanderthal. But, I don't suggest that. Don't do that to women. I like them. I have
hopefully that goes without saying.
Yeah, I shouldn't have to put that disclaimer in there, but just in case, somebody's like, yeah, I want to go out and bonk them. I don't want that to happen. But you were saying before that it opens your joints, and it does, because it creates a traction effect. The weight, when you extend your arm outward with the weights, and this is where a lot of people fail. They'll keep their elbows bent, or they'll keep until they get used to it, I should say. They'll keep, their joints tight. And then as they get more comfortable with it, you could see them becoming more fluid. And that's them relaxing their muscles, and trusting the weight that they're using. And then they can allow that tractioning effect of the weight to pull their joints open. Think about it. If you did overhead presses, right? You got 135 pounds on a bar, and you're banging it out for, 6 reps, 8 reps, or whatever, and you're doing it, you throw it on the floor, you wait 2 minutes, you pick it up again. That's just crushing you down. That's just compacting all your joints, compressing everything. The club, when you extend it outwards, it's tractioning out your shoulder, your spine, your elbow, your wrist, and it's allowing fresh nutrients and fresh blood to get in the joint area, especially to in the bursa area, because our joints have there's not too many things wrong with the human body, but one of the places that could have been designed a little better would be to have a little bit better blood flow. And I'm not talking about a lot. I'm just talking a little bit better blood flow to our joints. They take a long time to heal when they get hurt, because of the fact of I can't even say restricted or reduced, but the lower amount of nutrient exchange that goes on in the joints compared to the muscles and the tendons. So, it's just a different way to train. It's a great way to open up your body, especially if you are using heavy weights. As a bodybuilder, as a power lifter, as a construction worker, I can vouch for that. You work in a warehouse, you're putting boxes up on a shelf all day long, you're compressing yourself. And just as good as it feels when you come out of the chiropractor to get your spine stretched out and manipulated to get better blood flow there, the clubs and the mace can do that for your upper body, for your upper extremities and your shoulders. And, I really think it was a game changer. If I had known about club training, let me put it this way. I knew about Indian club training when I was younger. When I was in my teens and my 20s, I knew all about it. Did I pay attention to it? No, because I thought it was an old method that was outdated, and that modern barbell is better and science is teaching us all these things. Well, science seems to be reversing itself for all the stuff that we learned over the past 100 years, and saying, wait a second, this old stuff is actually good. They're proving it now that this stuff was good. So I think that in its, and the receptiveness of the functional fitness into fitness nowadays, and both by the medical community, with physical therapists and chiropractors and mobility specialist people, and over to the professional trainers and coaches that have people strength training. It's a lot more receptive than it was years ago. And like I said, I just disregarded this information because I was told that the weights would do it all for me. And in a way they did. They helped me develop, this product. If it wasn't for being involved in fitness at a young age, I would have never gotten injured and never developed this.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about that. It's a perfect segue. It's almost like I cued you and I didn't. And it's exactly what led you to developing, because your product's unique and I've trained with the other ones, right? Your product's unique. And this is one of the things I was going to bring up that was really cool is because I think there's a stereotype, kind of like kettlebells used to be or CrossFit used to be, that it was only for macho guys to do. But where I train, there are a lot of women who are using the club bells. There's a lot of women who are using the mace. And in part, I give credit to you because it is adjustable. And so that allows somebody to progress and to go down to different levels and still feel secure about
it. That statement, feeling secure. I never thought about that before, but I never thought of it that way. I just always looked at it as from a performance aspect. Obviously when you first start, you're going to want to use a light weight to develop the pattern, but then you're going to start to realize that you don't have enough weight after a while. And you're kind of, when you have the lightweight ones, if you're not really good with them, you don't make them do what they're supposed to do. A lot of people push them through space. But to get to that, like developing where I was, like how it got me there, I mentioned before, I was paying a lot of money in child support.
it.
So I saw the guy that he's the big club bell guy, and I saw his video and I fell in love with this type of training. Then I saw the price of them and I was like, wow, this is going to take me a long time to save up for one of those with this, big nut that I'm paying out on the other end. I don't have any money for myself. So that's why I grabbed that one-sided dumbbell to see if it would actually work. But then I noticed that, other people might be in the same position that I was, where they were able to afford a whole set of clubs. Now, I got to tell you this, when I first started training, I started out with the 3-pounder, and then after I was able to do the push-ups, I started changing the weight on there to more and more, which led me to, because I have a little bit of metal fabrication skills because of one of the 47 jobs that I had. I know how to weld a little bit, and I can do some machining. So I took an aluminum T-ball bat, and I said, why can't I just make myself like, a club that adjusts for myself, for my own use, because it works so well for me. And I'll just use some of these old weights that I have, and let me figure out a way to design to, sandwich it in the baseball bat, but I'm able to change the weight so I don't have to make a bunch of them. And, it was probably the hard way of doing it instead of doing like the, do you ever see the do-it-yourself club kit on YouTube where they use plumbing supplies and they build an exercise club out of it, and that you can fill with sand or concrete or lead shot or something. I basically could have done that for whatever it was for the price for $50 worth of parts. But instead, I took this T-ball bat to my buddy's welding shop, and I was like, let me make this thing over here. And he let me use all his tools and everything. And I made my first one. And matter of fact, I got one. I can't reach it because of the cord. I've got one behind me. And I sandwiched the weight in there, and it was just, an idea just to do this so that I would have an adjustable set for myself. And after training with it for a little while, I was like, I was thinking maybe other people could use this. So I was still developing it based on the baseball bat as the handle. And I was contacting companies like Easton and what's the other baseball bat manufacturer, Louisville Slugger.
Oh yeah.
I would contact them and I'd explain the idea to their people that would talk to me on the phone, and they'd be like, no, we're not interested in anything like that. So I kind of let the idea sit. And then all of a sudden, after I got arrested and I said, listen, I got a partial idea. I should put more thought into this, because I wanted to, be the author of my own life, basically, like the show says. I started working on the design that I sell now. And it went through a couple of changes, but the initial design I made in I think 2010 was my first drawing. And then I finally put it into production in 2013. It took me 3 years to get it actually in production. I made one prototype in 2011. It cost me a lot of money just to get that one prototype made. I could have bought a few sets of clubs for the amount of money that cost. I had to do the drawings for it. Thank goodness that I took mechanical drawing when I was in school as part of my shop class. I was able to draw the actual blueprints for the the design for the machinist to be able to, for him to follow. So I had all these little things in my life add up to, developing this. And like I said, I got it in 2013, and in 2014, I quit my job to actually do ADX full time. So I quit my job as working for a crane company, as a crane operator, making crane operator money to start my own business again. I think this is the 9th or 10th business. I'm not really sure that I've owned in my lifetime.
There you go. Well, you never give up, right?
Never.
Which is fantastic. And now you have a line of products that people are out there using, which I got to imagine feels great. That people are using and getting benefit from. My strength coach, my wife and I've talked about this on the show, we're taking 3 months traveling around the United States. We have this Sprinter van with our child, and my coach wants me to get either an adjustable club bell or adjustable mace as my one piece of equipment to carry around with me during this 3 months time, which is a testimony because I've owned a whole gym. So I have all the equipment available to me, which is pretty funny. So it is a testament to you and your product and the way that people that I could respect in the fitness industry think about it.
Oh, that is really cool because, it was so hard in the beginning. When I first started marketing, I think I sat with my prototype like right here next to this desk that I'm talking to you at. Obviously, it was a different computer then, but it was right here. I would train with it out in my backyard, right out this window behind me, and I was very apprehensive to like put it out there. It was almost like I was. I'm a fairly confident man, but this one was like the hardest one that I ever did. It basically felt like I was standing naked in front of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was like, this thing is either going to be ridiculed immensely or people are going to love it. And I don't even know how to promote. I didn't even really know how to use Facebook other than, trying to hit up old girlfriends and stuff like that because I was single for a long time, a very long time. And, I didn't have any concept of marketing on the internet. This was all learned, and I just had to, go through like my own head and sort out my own fears, in other words, to say, well, how do I bring this product out? How do I tell people about it? How do I not sound like a jerk or a douche, when I'm talking about it, where it's like, I can't overhype it and say it's the be all and end all, but I'm not kidding when I said before that if I was 12 years old, I should have learned how to swing clubs before I learned how to lift weights. And it's not because I make them and sell them. It's because I'm interested in people not getting hurt. I would have every younger teenager and pre-adolescent, swinging, doing body weight exercises first, and then gravitate towards clubs and maces, and then go into weights, but continue their club and mace training as supplementation for their weightlifting to keep them supple and injury free, and to also develop the rotator cuff muscles, which no matter how much weightlifting it seems that we do, they're always getting blown out on people. I mean, look at the shape Tom Brady's in. Let's just take him for example, and that was the easy person to go for. But he's had rotator cuff injuries. The guy's been throwing a football since he was 8 years old. How is it even possible? You know what? Like you say to yourself, how is that possible? Isn't he developed in that area, or is there something that we're overlooking?
Yeah.
And I think the centrifugal or rotational type of training is very, very important. With clubs, with maces, with sandbags. These things are very important. This ballistic style of training. It's not just for athletes. If you think about it, if you work for a living, if you do anything physical for a living, you're an athlete. You're getting paid to use your body to accomplish a task. To do work. And though it might not be a game in an arena in front of people, you're still getting paid to use your body. So that's an athlete, and you should be treating yourself as one.
Absolutely. I think all of us should be treating like ourselves as an athlete. We got one body. That's all.
Yes.
That's all we're given.
And it comes with no owner's manual.
Yeah, it doesn't. That's why one of the reasons I got so into fitness on the cerebral level. But, most of the strength coaches I know that are coaching baseball or softball players are using club bells now. They're gravitating towards that, especially for pitchers. And that goes right along with you're talking about Tom Brady. It's an overuse injury where you're having tremendous amounts of internal rotation on the shoulder girdle, which really needs to be, strengthened, but also that reverse, with that external rotation coming in. I think that's where both of these tools and sandbags to a lesser degree, in my opinion, but the mace and the club bells in particular really can come in handy. Now, Don, before we go into too much detail, and I know you've been so gracious with your time, and I know you and I could talk for hours here. You shared with me something I want to talk with, if that's okay. But during this business phase, because I can hear some people listening to this, they got tons of information on strength and conditioning and their shoulders. But I do think your story is also inspiring to those that want to start their own business, that have an invention, right? One of the things that I do and I teach my clients is, if you want a business, you don't know what you want to do, every day keep a document of problems and write the problems that you see or hear people talk about, because they're going to be solutions. Now, you did just that. You had a problem and you said, hey, look, I can come up with a solution. You achieved that, but then you brought that problem to market, and you were very transparent, saying you felt very vulnerable. You felt naked in the back, bringing it out. You also went to people that you respected, and they turned their back on you, and yet you still kept on going. And here we are today. And so for somebody that might be listening to this thinking, man, I resonate with Don. I see what he's doing, but I'm nervous. Do I really want to do this, or, bring this to market? Do I want to take the first step? What would you say to that person listening?
Do what you want to do, because if you don't do it, I heard a story, or it was probably on one of those Facebook motivational things where they got Morgan Freeman talking, or something. It's a lot of inspiration. But one of the lines was in there. One of the lines was, the wealthiest place in the world is the graveyard, because that's where people died with their ideas.
Ooh.
And that really, now I heard this before I was in the back of the cop car the last time. All right. And I was, it was sticking with me, like, do this idea. You got this idea. Look where you are right now, in the back. Now, I'm not saying that I'm a bad person or anything like that, but thank goodness I was only in the back of that cop car in handcuffs for a DUI. It wasn't for something more serious where I'd be going away and my whole life would be thrown out. So if you have an idea, cherish every day that you get to work on that idea or bring that idea out to someone, because every day you don't is one step closer to accomplishing nothing. But when you do, put your idea into production, or have it gain momentum, or start moving it. Let's just say, just initiate it and start it going. That's really important, and that's the hardest part that we were talking about, just do it. You don't need anyone's permission. Don't ask your friends if they think it's a good idea. Listen, you already know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, and you don't have to test the market or anything like that. Just go on the internet. You could do a little quick search to see if anybody's got something similar to that idea, or if somebody's doing the thing that you want to do, or teach people how to do. And if very few people or nobody's doing it, do it. And just keep working at it. I mean, I did this all day long at my regular job because I was afforded the time. I really didn't have to do anything at this job. The other guy, I already knew he was a good crane operator. I didn't have to do the job that I was assigned to. I was basically sitting on a picnic table all day long and drawing my drawings until I had to do something. But I had that freedom. So I'm saying that I was lucky enough to have that. But I don't care if you're working 2 jobs. When you come home at night, start implementing your idea. Write it down. Get it into words. Get it onto a piece of paper. Make drawings. If it's a book, start typing it. And don't care what it looks like. Don't stare at like authors have to. They say writers have to get drunk so that they, when they're looking at a blank page. It's the same thing for somebody with an idea. Like, you have to get the courage up to do. You don't need any. Nobody sees what you're doing. Just do it. Like, nobody knows. They really don't. Like, I realized afterward it was so foolish of me to do that, but it's just our human nature and the fear of failing. And then I realized in my life, how many times have I failed compared to, and I'm still here, and I'm still in one piece, and, my family is still here, and, I'm okay. I failed so many times. And if I didn't fail at things, I wouldn't learn how to do things. And that goes for all of us. That's how you learn, by failing. You don't learn it by doing it perfect the first time. You learn it by messing up, because the difference between a master and a master worker and a regular worker is that the master worker knows how to get out of situations that the regular worker hasn't gotten into yet.
I like that.
So that is the only difference. And somebody told me that when I was making pizza. Okay. That I had a problem with a pizza sticking to a wooden peel. And like you make the pizza, you stretch it, you put it on the wooden board, and you slide it in the oven, and it's stuck. And I couldn't get this thing to lift off, no matter how much flour I threw under it. And this guy shows me a trick. He took a piece of string that we used to tie bakery boxes together with, and he ran it underneath the pizza. And he goes, "Hang it over here. Leave it for the next time this happens to you." And sure enough, that pizza shot right off of that peel when I put it in the oven. So I was like, "That," and he says, "That's because I'm a master." And I said, "How many years have you been doing this?" He goes, "That doesn't matter." He goes, I made more mistakes than you did." He goes, "And I know how to fix them." And I was like, wow, that's really cool. So, don't be afraid to do it. Don't be afraid that you're not doing it right. You'll figure out how to do it right as time goes on. I didn't get my first design perfect. I got it good, and I sold them. And I think I sold 150 of them before I changed the design to something a little better. And then I changed the design again. So, and you also have to remember that, you need to keep room for improvement. Always think that way. Michelangelo lived by a saying called ancora imparo, which means I'm always learning, or I'm always a student, translated from Italian. And that means always be receptive to learn. No matter how good you get at something, you can still learn a little bit more to make it, that much better.
Awesome.
So, you have to keep an open mind about that. I hope that was a good answer to your question.
That's a great answer. I use some of those analogies when people ask me how I business coach, but it's just because I screwed up more than everybody,
Yeah. So you understand that.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. I think this is great advice. And anybody listening to this, this is 2 sections, right? We went over health and fitness, inspiration, and also business. All in one episode. Don, you've been so generous with your time. I'd love to have you back, because I know you and I could go on for another 3 or 4 hours and just pull out gold nuggets from you. For those listening that want to follow up, they want more, whether it be just want more of you, things you're putting out, are interested in Club Bells or Maces or the other things that you've produced, and even just want to see them, where should they go?
adexclub.com. That's ADEXCLUB.com. And that's my website. And you can see I'm at an inventory and a lot of things. I just was over at the machine shop today. By the way, all my stuff is made in the USA. Giving a little shameless plug here, make sure my neighbors stay employed so that, people's yards don't start, looking all terrible because they lost their jobs. So I'm going to make sure that actually, I think 4 of the machinists live in my neighborhood. And then the guy who does my coding is right down the street too. He lives in the neighborhood next to me.
Awesome.
So everybody's it's pretty cool. So, help keep America beautiful by, making sure everybody has a job. So my neighborhood always looks good.
I love it.
So,
I love it. And then for those listening, I will definitely be sharing on social media and also through this channel my experience as I travel around and use Don's products, because it's definitely something that I'll be using too on my journey. So Don, thank you again so much for taking the time out of your busy day. I look forward to talking to you more.
Thank you, Doug. It was great being on the show, and I really liked it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
At Author of Your Own Story, we believe in taking a holistic approach to your health, where you aren't just physically healthy, but your entire mind, body, and soul is operating at its most optimal level. To get started in creating holistic health, download our free holistic health checklist at authorofyourownstory.com/body-gift. And don't forget to be the author of your own story.